everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of Office Hours. I am, as usual, Adam Coble, and as you can see, we're doing things a little bit different today. I've got my green screen up because I'm going to take you on a trip. We are going to access the virtual world. So I talked about this in the last Office Hours episode and have talked a little bit about it since. What's been happening in the world these days, as of the time of recording this, is that a lot of people are not getting to access their in-person group anymore. We, to some degree or another, have all been isolated from one another because of this pandemic situation. I know a ton of people are looking to get into replacing their in-person games with online games, either bringing that game into a virtual tabletop or taking up new games in that space with online communities. And since I've been using Roll20 since 2014 or so, I've picked up a thing here and there, and I'd love to share it with you. So what we're going to do today, instead of answering 3 questions like we usually do, what we're going to do is I'm going to jump into Roll20, and we're going to spend the next hour basically walking through all the features that I use when I run the campaigns that I run. So if you've watched Descent into Avernus or Far Verona or Court of Swords or any of that action, you've seen me using Roll20, but I don't always have the opportunity to kind of walk through the various bits and pieces of what I do. So admittedly, it's going to be, I guess this is true of all the episodes of Office Hours, this is going to be very specifically from my perspective. So the way that I use Roll20 might differ from yours if you've already got some experience with it. You might also know some tips and tricks that I don't know. So feel free to share those as we go through the episode if you have some ideas. I'm going to start at the very most basic. We're going to create a game. I'm going to talk about inviting players and getting the game set up, and we'll talk about maps, and we'll get as much done as we can in an hour, and hopefully we'll have some time at the end if you have specific questions for anything that I haven't covered. So it's not a scripted demo. It's not a pre-laid out, modular stream. As with all the episodes of Office Hours, I'm just going to kind of walk you through what's going on in my brain when I do the thing. So I hope that this will be interesting for you. This will be entertaining. And I hope that on the other end, you come out feeling more confident about using Roll20 so that you can go out and play games, because that's the whole point, isn't it? It's just to have a place where you can play games. So let me take you on over to Roll20. So the Roll20 account structure is tiered in 3 ways. And this is something that I see a lot of confusion around. People aren't sure what's included in what. This is the structure of how a Roll20 account works. So the base version of the tabletop, base version of Roll20 gets you access to the virtual tabletop. It gives you a limited amount of storage space. It allows you to share with one game any compendium products that you've bought, and allows you to have 2 active listings on the LFG system at once. And then, as you can see, as the tiers go up from base to plus and plus to pro, you get access to more features in the system. So custom character sheets, for example, you get those at the pro level, but you'll figure out for your group what is the best fit in terms of the model. Now, the thing that I do want to point out here is shared table features. So this is available for both plus and pro, right? Shared table features means that if you create a game, the features of your account apply to that game. So like if you are a pro user and everyone in your group is a free user, you can still use dynamic lighting, API access, custom character sheets, all of that good stuff by way of your particular account. So what I often see happen is one person, often the GM, is a pro user, and then everyone else has their own variant user levels depending on what they need. So I wanted to we'll just go through the list of the features real quick, just so you kind of know what you're getting into. And it'll also help us paint a broad picture of what's available in Roll20, the kinds of tools you can see. So then you can understand kind of where you might lie. So upload storage literally just means how many GIFs, MP3s, WAV files, JPEGs, whatever, right? You can upload into your account. Now, this is your library. It's going to get shared between all your accounts. If you have a free user account, you can upload 100 megs of stuff. and you can use that in as many games as you want. And I'll show you some of my uploads when we get into one of the games. But that's basically it. So it's 100, 3, or 6 gigs in that way. Obviously, ads are ads. You either get them or you don't. Shared table features we talked about. Dynamic lighting is either your favorite feature or you never use it, depending on the game you're playing and depending on the kinds of maps that you use. I really like dynamic lighting, but I almost exclusively use it in like dungeon crawl environments. I've used it in sci-fi games as well, but if you're playing Vampire the Masquerade, for example, chances are you're not using a detailed combat map. Chances are pretty good dynamic lighting isn't going to be a feature you're going to need, but it's definitely interesting. It's really cool. And there are some big updates coming to it in the future. So it's worth checking out if you think that it would be useful. I'll show you how dynamic lighting works when we get in. Yeah, it's a fun feature, right? I really like it. And I love the ability to, and we used to do this with pieces of paper on a map on a table where you'd cover some of them and you'd reveal rooms as the characters went through. So it's really nice. And I think it's one of those features that goes from emulating a role-playing game to creating something new, right? It's something you can't really do as easily in person. So yeah, custom character sheets, allowing you to customize the sheets that are in the system or create your own sheets. So if you or someone in your group knows HTML, knows CSS, wants to create a new character sheet or adapt an existing one, you would need to be a pro user for that. API access. So the API is where you get really deep into the complex stuff. And unless you're playing a game like Fantasy Flight Star Wars or Genesis, or you want to use some of the really interesting bells and whistles of automation, like, for example, every time you click a ranged attack, it reduces your ammo by 1. The API can allow you to do that, but it still does require a lot of, copying and pasting and getting set up. And we'll talk about it when we create a new account. Dev server access. This is basically just like in an MMO. You can get access to the test realm. So if you want to look at features early, again, pro users get access to that. It's not something that I think most people use, but if you're looking to develop within Roll20, right, you're trying to create your own stuff, that's a way that you can do it, right? The character vault. Character vault is one of those features that when it was announced, I was like, okay, that's fine. I don't imagine I'm ever going to really need that. But whenever I have used it, I've been very thankful for it. So what it allows you to do is take a character from a game and copy them into a vault, and then you can export them from that vault into a new game. So if you're playing an adventure and your characters are finished that adventure and you want to create a new Roll20 game with a new module, you don't have to recreate the characters from scratch. You can just put them in the vault and then you can move them over. Yeah. Right. Useful for games where you have the same character and you're moving around. Yeah, that's right. Compendium sharing is when you purchase something in the compendium, and we'll talk about the compendium when we get into the tools section. But compendium sharing means that you have a certain number of games and a certain number of players that you can basically share your books with. So if you buy the Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition Player's Handbook and you have compendium sharing, a free account can share it with 1 game and 5 players within that game. A plus account has 3 and 10, and a pro has 5 and maxes out at 15 players. So obviously for me, compendium sharing is a really useful tool because I have access to this stuff through Roll20, but I have access to the compendium. And when I turn on compendium sharing, it allows me to run Avernus, Court of Swords, Jace Beleren Must Die, and a couple of D&D one-shots using all of my compendium stuff. This is particularly useful if you are making characters or having your players make a character, because if they don't have access to the compendium, features like the Charactermancer won't have those details in it. So compendium sharing is that way that you can take what you've bought and you can hand out to your players to use. And then if you are using the looking for group tool, the differences between the set are 2 listings, an unlimited number of listings, and then an unlimited number of listings that are also highlighted. So these are the 3 tiers. You're going to probably start with the free one, play around in the system a little bit, and then decide whether you want to go pro or plus. And then again, it can be different within your group. Not everybody has to have the same thing. So my setup is very much going to be based around pro, right? I have access to everything in the marketplace, all the compendium stuff, so that I can use it in my streams for Roll20. But you know, if you have a question or if you're like, oh, where does that feature come from? Just let me know and we'll talk about it as we go along. But assume that what you're seeing is basically everything there is to see outside of the dev server, because we're just going to stick to the normal stuff. So when you log into Roll20, right, when you come to Roll20 for the first time, you've created your account, you're going to get taken to this screen. This is your My Games screen. It's going to show all the campaigns that you currently have, and it's going to show them in order of the ones that are most recently logged into. So this screen on your first time will be blank, right? You're not going to see a bunch of campaigns, but you can see here, these are all the ones that I've played most recently or been a part of. Now, if you're a part of a campaign, but you're not running it or not joining it, you're going to see it bump to the top of the list anytime it becomes active for anyone. So even though I was only on one episode of Bag of Bones, right? I was in a one shot. The next time Bag of Bones is launched as a game, it'll get moved to the top of my list. I tend to leave this list pretty long. I don't usually delete stuff. But you know, if you get cluttered up or you have a ton of practice games or whatever, you can delete them relatively easily. You can search for your games by keyword or tag just by looking up here. Yeah, I have a lot. There's a lot of games in this system, but it's because I'm too lazy to delete them. And because you never know, right? You never know when you might need something from some game and you want to go back and dig in. You can think of them essentially as like folders that contain all of the handouts, characters, maps, tokens, etc. for your game. And you've given a key to that book to everybody that's within the game. So the most important button on here, though, for you, if this is your first time logging into Roll20, it's this bad boy. It's create new game, right? So this is how we, guess what, create a new game. Now, some of the pro features will add to this, right? You'll have copy from dev, access the dev server, custom sheet, sandbox. We're not going to worry about those right now. That's deep end stuff, even for me. So let's just walk through making a new game in Roll20. So when you click create new game, it's going to take you to, again, surprise, surprise, the create new game page. So usually I'll throw a name in here for me, right? So I know what the game is, and it'll notify any player. It'll put them in that game name. So we'll go office hours test game, and then you can tag it. And this is another way to organize your game. So you might want to tag it with themes or settings, or like, for example, if I start a new game set in the Court of Swords universe, I could tag it with Court of Swords. This is going to help you organize your own games, and it's going to help people find your game when you're looking for players. So you can theoretically just hit I'm ready, create game, and rock and roll from there. This will give you a completely blank account with nothing built into it, and you'll be able to start from there. Now, this is useful if you're using a game that you have paper character sheets and you don't need character sheets in the game. But generally, if it's available, even if I'm not going to use the character sheets for it, generally, if it's available, I will pick the game that I'm playing from here, because sometimes there are extra tools that are available within those things, extra objects that you can put in. The other thing that we can look at is modules. So a module essentially takes all the GM prep that you would do yourself, which is to say, putting in the map, statting out the monsters, creating character sheets, creating tokens, et cetera, right? You could do all that yourself and then bring your players in. The module essentially is all of that already, right? It's the maps. It's all the stuff you see on Dragon Heist or Descent into Avernus, right? Those streams that I do, we use the official Roll20 modules. So if you are playing a module, if you're going to play Storm King's Thunder, you're going to play one of the Call of Cthulhu adventures, right? You're going to play Kids on Bikes. Definitely take a look and see if there is a module version, because this stuff for me this is how I got spoiled. This is how Roll20 spoiled me for regular tabletop. So take a look for a module, or if you're just looking for like something to try out, there's lots of modules in the marketplace as well. So for right now, I'm going to pick a character sheet, and I'm going to show you kind of how the character sheets work, and we're going to talk about compendiums and all of that stuff. And then what I'll do is I'll come back to another account and I'll show you like how a module works, and we'll show you some of the more advanced features, that sort of thing. So, all I'm going to make a new Dungeon World game. Now you can see the sheets that come with Roll20. They're divided in two ways. They're divided by the game, but they're also divided into sort of first party dev and third party dev. So by that, I mean, if it says sheets by Roll20, it means that someone or someone's on the Roll20 team, they made this character sheet. It is sort of an official D&D or Dungeon World or Cypher System character sheet approved by the developer and created by the team at Roll20. And then there are sheets by publisher, which are publisher created but imported into the list, right? So you can see Blades in the Dark, we can see Valor, Sword and Scoundrel, the Stargate RPG, and then from there they're listed by game name. And the forums are pretty active in developing new character sheets for various games. So chances are good, even if you can't find an official sheet, there'll probably be a fan-based sheet in the system somewhere for whatever game you're going to play. And this list has grown massively since even I started playing. So you'll have lots of options. You'll also see that within certain games, there are multiple variations of the character sheet. So if you don't like the official 5e character sheet, you can use the shaped sheet, right? Which is obviously much more complicated. You can use the Darker Dungeons version of the sheet, right? There's lots of variants of some of the more popular systems. So I'm gonna go ahead and we're gonna just do a Dungeon World game because it's a nice, easy way to show off a bunch of stuff. So I'll create a new game. I'm not gonna tag it because someone's gonna play it. So I'm gonna hit create game. And this is our game page. So this is gonna bring you in, this is gonna tell you all the details you need to know at a glance for your game. So you have an option to drop in a file here, right? So here, let's put one in. So you can drop this in as a header. I try to do this most of the time because it helps visually differentiate the games on the previous screen, right? So that'll bring this up as a header. It's going to show it for everybody that joins the game. So there's our little header graphic. Launch game will take you into the game's page itself, but we're not going to click there yet, right? We're not ready to do that. Content is going to give you access to your chat archive and journal of the game. So if you need access to those. Looking for player, this is allowing you to create a listing in the looking for game, looking for player subsystem. So if this is going to be a public game, you can click on create listing. That's going to take you to another page. And then if you did something during the creation of the game and you're like, I need to go back and fix it, settings will take you to game settings. So if you're like, oh, we were going to play Dungeon World, but we're actually going to pivot and we're going to play Burning Wheel instead, you can just go in and change the character sheet. Now, this may cause havoc if you've already filled out character sheets for your game, right? Because it's going to take any field that has the same name in the database and it's going to put it in the new character sheet. So changing the game midway through, you're probably better off creating a new game. But if you haven't started yet, if you don't have any like stuff built, you can go into game settings and you can change it up. This is also where you can duplicate your game. If you want to take some risks and mess around with the game, you make a copy. Clear the chat archive, delete the game, and then roll it back to earlier versions. There is some version control within the game. So let's say we're gonna say this is a Dungeon World game. We can decide when the next game will be, so players can tune in and check it out. So this game's gonna be today at 11 a.m. Right? Okay. You can add a description of your game, and again, these things are especially important for when you're doing your creating for your listing, right? Because this will tell people what to expect of your game, right? You can also create topics. Every game has its own little minor forum. So if you want to keep track of notes or you want to pass information for your players purely within the game's record, then you can click on post new topic here. The other two things that are interesting, one is new and one is somewhat older, game add-ons and marker sets. So game add-ons are basically anything you can buy from the marketplace that isn't specifically a module, a map, or a token. So these tend to be functional things like card decks. They are sometimes sub-adventures, right? They're also animated. There are some people that do animated spell effect packs through this. So game add-ons cover a sort of miscellaneous grab bag of a bunch of stuff. I really like I like the pixel spell art ones. So you can click an add-on, you can click add to game. This list will auto-populate from your marketplace purchases. So you can do that. You can just add these in and you can add and remove them. Shows what's there. And then the same for token marker sets. Now we'll talk more about tokens and markers and stuff when we get there, but I love these. I love these to death because for a really long time, we just had the built-in ones. So when you were adding token markers, you were adding in a lot of black and white little like rooks or swords or whatever. We're all familiar with the Roll20 token markers. This has opened up the marketplace to create their own custom ones. So now I can have a much cuter little icon indicating that the characters in the game are affected by a status effect or whatever. So you can manage all that over on token marker sets. The last thing to do before you actually get into your game from this screen is invite players. So when you click invite players, you will be able to put in emails. You'll be able to copy and paste a link. This is how you get new players into the game, right? And so it'll show your player list underneath once you have some players joining the game. Now, what I normally will do when I start a game is I'll create a Roll20 account for it. I'll build it. I'll create the link and I'll send it to my players and say, log in once, right? You don't have to log in again until the game starts, but log in once so I can assign you a character sheet, right? And we'll talk about how that goes. So let's jump into the game. Let's take a look at the actual Roll20 interface and we'll walk through some basic stuff that I always do when I start up a new game. So here is the default screen on Roll20. This is the first thing you're going to see when you come in. It's composed of the map area in the middle, right? Your surface, your table surface. You've got your character or your players in your game down here. And there's a default name in your profile and a default image. This is mine. It's going to have your color, your default color. And this means that every time you use the drawing tool, the color will default to whatever you have set. So if you pick the drawing tool, see how it changed to pink there from purple? So blank screen, you've got your chat log and roll log over here on this side. And then there's the toolbar on that side. So let me show you the very first thing I always do. Always do. So first thing I do is up here in the toolbar, up in the top right corner, you can see it up there. I go to my settings, which is the gear. I usually will change my display name to something appropriate to the game. So I might be like Office Overlord Adam for this game, right? I can save it. You can see that changes my name down there. This is also going to show you everything that every time you paste something into chat, it shows you, unless you change it, it shows you as that. So there you go. So you can see it shows me as Office Overlord Adam. Now, if you're like me and you have players that have very long names, that's fine. Just keep in mind that it's going to eat up a lot more space. Every time you log in, you're going to get a link for the campaign, and you're going to get some basic reminders of how Roll20 works so that new players can see basic stuff like how to roll dice, how to whisper to the GM, how to communicate within the chat system, and all that gets logged in the chat logs. But before I even begin drawing on the map or dragging in anything, I go immediately to my settings, change my display name, and then I turn on advanced keyboard shortcuts, which we probably won't have time for today, but I use them. I make sure window pop-outs is off. I have the enabled chat beep turned off. I don't like it because also I'm producing, and I'm sure if you've watched enough live D&D content using Roll20, you've tuned into a show on the commercial break and heard the boop, boop, boop of people making rolls during the break. So I always turn it off for production purposes. Basically, all it does is that it makes sure that the system makes a sound when a roll is made or a message is made. So if you need that, turn it on. I leave advanced dice on. I turn on 3D dice. I automatically roll 3D dice. And I usually leave the rest. Now, down here, we look at some of the more specific game settings that we'll talk more about when we get into later. But I'll continue and I'll turn off the video player and the audio player because I use a different tool. Now, I know for a lot of people, this is sort of a point of contention. So Roll20 does have built into it a voice, video, and then obviously text chat version of a communication tool. It's all built in, right? So you can, if you want to, you can enable those, right? And you can use the Chrome or Firefox WebRTC. You can use the legacy WebRTC. I don't personally use them because I need something a bit more reliable and a bit higher bandwidth. And I also don't really like having small versions of the characters or the players' portraits. I like having them on a separate screen. So if you're working on a laptop or you are in a position where you don't have access to another piece of software and you want to do it all through Roll20, you can, but I can't really say much more about it because that's not a feature I think I've ever used. I always come in and disable it. If you ever find that you're getting weird feedback, like audio feedback, and you are using it, you can just make sure that everybody has it turned on, set to the same thing. But generally speaking, I'm going to go to Zoom, right? If there's somebody in the group that has a paid subscription, I'm going to go to Zoom, or I'm going to use Discord video or Hangouts or something else that's a dedicated video and audio program. The other thing that I do is I come in here and I turn off player avatar size. I set it to name only because, again, I don't need to have I need all the real estate I can get, and having an entire row down here of player portraits is going to eat up a big chunk of my screen. So that's a thing that I turn off as well. Now, of course, yours are likely to be different, and we'll talk a little bit more about what you can do in the settings in a second. So as a GM, which is that's the target audience for this conversation. As a GM, the very, very first thing that I do almost universally is I start organizing my handouts and I start organizing my my library. So let's do that. Let's take a look at the tools over here. So we've looked at settings, right? Settings is the gear, and we know that chat is the little chat bubble, but this is your library, and this little guy right here, your art library. And then this is the journal. So these two are real important. So the art library is going to show you everything that you have either uploaded or an asset from the marketplace, right? So you can see premium assets and you can see my library. So my library is a place where you can both upload images. Like, for example, let's find an image I uploaded. Like this excellent picture of, what do we call him? A glucose gopher. So Glucose Gopher is in my library because I uploaded this little scamp myself and it showed up in my recent uploads, right? But my library also contains any asset that I have saved for use later. So I'm going to use Moonbeam pretty regularly. So I've saved it and it shows up in my library. So now here's Glucose Gopher getting hit with a Moonbeam. So my library is the place where you're going to see all of that stuff. You can always scroll through it. It's listed by file name. So don't be dumb like me. Don't be a fool and put in images without renaming them. Because if I'm looking for an image of Teza Karlov, I'm definitely not going to go looking for 3C824FFBDC04D79, right? I can now no longer search for this image. So make sure that when you upload things, they at least have names that you can search for. That's something I wish that I had learned way back when I first started. So as you upload everything, it doesn't matter whether it's a header for your game or a map or a token or whatever, it shows up in your libraries. You can see that I added, this is my header for that game. And so when you drag it onto the map, if you just click anything in your library, left click, drag, and it'll drop it onto the map for you. Right? I'll show it on the map. Now, if you want to, you can rename things once you put them in, right? You can right click and rename item. So now I could say this is Tybalt and it'll rename it for me. Yeah, just keep in mind that you don't have to do it. You don't have to do it twice. So the other thing here is if you're dragging something and you need it to maintain the same dimensions as the original, you can hold the Alt key on your keyboard and you can drag and it'll place it with the same dimensions as you had it originally. But if you just click and drag, it'll fill one box. So keep that in mind when you are dragging and dropping things. If you hold Alt, basically at any time, it tells the game to ignore the grid. Like, for example, okay, I'm going to Alt drag something, right? So let's Alt drag Izoni. We can see that Izoni doesn't quite match, right? And as long as I hold Alt when I drag Izoni around, we're fine. But if I let go of Alt, she's going to clip to the nearest or snap to the nearest edge, right? And then if I resize, this is what a 2x3 version of that Izoni card looks like. Yeah. So that's how you get access to your library. If you need to search for anything, you can search up here and you can search either just your library or you can search your premium assets, right? You can also do it. I think it defaults to both. So let's do a search. Let's search for sewer, right? So what it's going to do is it's going to search and it's going to prioritize them. And then I can further say, I don't want to see my library, show me just my premium assets, or vice versa. Now, my search takes probably longer than anyone else's because it has to search the entire marketplace. Your search feature will be much faster. Now, it's going to be searching based on the name of the things in the market, in the marketplace purchases. It's also going to be searching for tags. So when people upload things, even though this aberration, this ooze lurker, does not have the word sewer in its name, the creator tagged it with the word sewer because it's a monster that lives in a sewer. So I can go ahead and just drag that, and there we go. Now I have my ooze lurker. Now, one thing about dragging stuff from your toolbar is that it's going to drag it onto whatever layer you're currently looking at. And that's when we come over here and take a look at these. So this is your toolbox. These are the things you do to manipulate the map that you're on. And the very first tool is whether you're selecting or panning. I never use the pan tool. I don't know. It's just not for me. I tend to zoom and like drag. I use the right click, but if you want to, you can click to pan view and that'll drag the screen around. But this is the important one. And even now, even 5 years on, I still make mistakes as far as what layer I'm on. So the game has 3 or 4 layers depending on your level of access. There's the map and background layer. There's objects and tokens. There's the GM info overlay, and there's dynamic lighting, right? Now, there may or may not be dynamic lighting for you. And if you're a player, you just have access to the overlayer, and you can only access the tokens you can use. But as a GM, those are the tools. So let me show you the differences between them. So we'll do a quick map. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna drag this map up here, right? Now I'm on the token layer right now. So technically this map is a token. This is treating it like a giant monster. Now, if you make a mistake, if you dragged it onto the wrong layer and you need to move it, you can right click the token and you can go to layer and you can push it to the map layer. Now I can't click on it. Now it's in the map layer, right? Now I've committed a cardinal sin of mapping in that I've used a tile with squares that do not match the squares of the game, but we'll talk about that in a second. So now I've got a map, right? And I want to add a monster. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna click on objects and tokens to make sure I'm on that layer. And then I'm gonna grab this ooze lurker and I'm gonna drop him on. And there he is. Now, the ooze lurker might be a large creature, right? If we're playing D&D or something. I played him in here and he's too small, so I can just resize. Now, if I want it to be an abnormal size, right? I can again hold Alt and I can resize it and it won't snap on its own. So now I have a very big boy in the sludge, right? And now whatever happens on this layer will not affect the map. I can draw on the layer, I can move the monster around, but the map layer itself is safe. Now, if you need another layer to add something, let's say that in this room, as I'm crafting it, we have some servants of the big ooze monster, but they're hiding, right? They're not here yet, or maybe they're invisible, or I just need to get access to them later. So I can put them on the map layer or on the token layer. I can select them and I can shove them to the GM layer. And now you can see that they're invisible and the players won't be able to see them when they come onto this map, right? They're not going to be able to see those tokens. They're going to be able to see this big boy, but those tokens are invisible. So what I'll do is for prep, if I have a few maps I want to make, I'll go through and I'll do that. It's basically map layer, token layer, GM layer. If I'm using dynamic lighting layer, and done, right? And those are my maps. Now, if you don't want a square map or you want to customize some of the things about the map, go to your page toolbar, which is this little blue bookmark up here. This is the active page that the players are currently on, right? You can go create new page to get a brand new screen. Think of these as pages in your folder, right? Or you can modify an existing one by clicking on page settings. So if I wanted to change the scale, say I want this map to be bigger, let's make it 50 by 50. That's going to give me extra. Now you see how much more map I have to work with, right? So I can play around with that. We can also change the background color. right? So you're doing space, or you want to do like a kind of cyberpunk aesthetic. You can make the background black, and then you can change the grid color as well. So now we have green on black instead, right? So you can play around with that, help it match the map, that sort of thing. You can also change the grid cell. So by default, each square is 5 feet. You can change that to meters, kilometers, miles, inches, centimeters, units, hexes, or squares if you want to. You can turn the grid on and off. And if the grid is on, you can say, is it square, vertical, or horizontal hexes? What form of measurement does it use, right? When you're measuring diagonals. And then how wide is each cell and how opaque is that line? Yeah. In here, if you have access to the features, this is where you turn on and off fog of war, advanced fog of war, and dynamic lighting. Now, I'm gonna show you while we're talking about maps. I'm gonna actually jump back to my cam here, and I'm gonna change games, and I'm gonna take you over to show you a finished map from. Let's take a look at Descent into Avernus. So we'll take a look at a finished map, and then we can talk about player and assigning characters. Basically, what I want to do today, knowing that we have a limited amount of time, is I want to put you in a position to get in and start your game as quickly as possible, and then we'll likely do a follow-up episode to go into more detail on some of the advanced stuff. Okay, so I'm just loading up my Descent into Avernus map right now. And let's take a look at, let's find a map here. Let's take a look. We'll take a look at the map of the Bone Brambles. Okay, so if we take a look, pop on over to Roll20 here. Here we go. So this is a map from a module. This is a pre-made map. It was designed by a cartographer at Wizards of the Coast, and it was put into Roll20 by the Roll20 team, and then all the features were activated. So you can see a bunch of tokens. You can see I'm using all 3 layers. We've got our initiative tracker up here, which we can talk about later. And on this map, I'm going to show you a few tricks for managing a map. Now, what's important about this one, I'm going to zoom out, is you can see there are a couple of little tricks. So I've got on the GM layer, I've got monsters that I'm going to use in this encounter, but who haven't showed up in the encounter yet. So I've got on my GM layer, I have these 3 shambling mounds, right? So I can grab them and I can bring them into the game, right? I've also got all the players' tokens, right? And some of those tokens have effects on them. So for example, this is the aftermath of a battle. You can see that we have Lulu here with an aura. So if you need to track something like an anti-magic aura or a paladin aura or anything like that, you can add those auras by left-clicking twice, double left-click on the token. And this is where you can change up what the token represents. You can change the name of the token. So if I was getting sick of seeing Hollyphant, I could say this is a Hollyphant, but the name of the token is Lulu. I could tint it if I want to change the color. It shows me what each bar is tracking from the character sheet. So it shows me those, right? And so this is all the various fields, right? So I'm just gonna, there we go. NPC, let's see, HP is a separate set. Sorry, I'm trying to fix a token for my game. There we go. Okay, so this will show you each bar up above, right? So the green bar will show Lulu's hit points. Right? If it's a scale instead of a number, it'll add additional bars. So if you're playing a game with like mana points, or you're playing Genesis and you have wounds and strain, you can add both of those. Again, just by double left clicking, you can choose what part of the character sheet they show. And then down here are the auras. So right now, Lulu has, as you can see, a 10-foot yellow aura. If I want to use square auras, I could just click the square box and save. So that's auras. You can have 2 at once with 2 different colors. And then this is an important thing to do. So if you have an aura here and your players can't see it, go to advanced, and this will show what the characters can see. Now, this is important because if you don't want to show the health bar of a monster to your players, you want to make sure bar 1, 2, and 3 are all off for C. Same with name, right? If you want to let them see the name of the token, you can show that there. You can also decide where the bars appear, top or bottom. And then here's where you can turn on the auras. So right now, the players can't see Lulu's aura. right? That yellow glow is invisible to the players. It's just for me. Now that's useful because I sometimes want that. I want to obfuscate those auras, but if not, I can just click on C, and now all the players will be able to do this. So there's basically two kinds of tokens on a map, right? There are tokens that are connected to a character sheet, and there are tokens that aren't. Now, obviously, like Sathra, for example, Sathra's token is connected to her character sheet, right? Represents character, Sathra, name, Sathra. Now, to do that, to connect a new token to a character, let's walk through creating a character, right? Let's walk through creating a new character or helping your players create characters and what you need to do as a GM to help them get started. So if we had a new character in this game, I would go into the journal, right? Remember the journal is this little guy, and I would click add, and I would add a new character, right? So adding a new character creates a blank character with a generic name with no token and no art. And that's great. That's what you want. So you can change their name. As the GM, you assign the character to a specific person. So if Elf was playing this new character, I would click Distracted Elf. That means that this character will show up in Elf's journal, but Elf won't be able to edit or control the character until I also add her to this list. So this is a way that you can create characters that people can see, like henchmen or hirelings, but that they cannot themselves control, right? So that's a way to do this for a character. So you go ahead and add that. You can tag the character if you want, another useful way to search for them. And then if you have art, you can click to upload it, or if you have it in your catalog, right, in your library, you can click, right? I'm gonna do this again real slow. Left click, drag, instead of dragging it to the board, drag it to avatar. So now Erased Nin is a floating skull, right? So it shows up in there. So that's how you can create art there, or you could just upload it straight from your desktop, right? Like, for example, like so, it'll upload it and it'll get it added to your library. So there's me as an Animal Crossing character. So once you click save, you've got 3 types of attribute on the sheet. Now, if you're not using a built-in sheet, you'll pretty much just have bio and info. But if you're using any kind of character sheet that is already in the system, you're going to see character sheet and you're going to see attributes and abilities. Attributes and abilities, don't worry about this. Unless you are messing with your character sheet or you're building a new character sheet, you'll probably never have to use this tab. For your players and for you, bio and info and character sheet are what are most important. So bio and info is going to show up a picture of your character. There's some notes that you can make as the GM, right? So if I want to edit, I can say, this character is not as good as Adam thinks they are, right? Now, no one will be able to see this except GMs in the game. And then under bio and info, the player can say, I am so good. What a good character. And this is what'll show up once that's saved, right? Character, information, and then those guys. So on the character sheet, again, this will look very different depending on what you're doing. If you're interested in seeing how the Dungeons and Dragons character sheet works more specifically, there are videos available for that. Roll20 has posted blog posts as well. So I'm not going to go too deeply into any of these features. But essentially, all the character sheet is a series of fields that connect to a database. So for example, on this character sheet for Erased Nin, let's make a token and I'll show you what I mean. Okay. So here's our token for our character, right? So our new character, we're going to sync up this sheet and the token. So everything that's on here is a database field that the rest of Roll20 can use to trigger roll macros. It can use to display information on tokens, etc. So if I'm looking at my token here, right, I'm going to go in. This is a brand new token. I just dragged it from the assets. I'm going to click it here. It doesn't represent any character, doesn't have a name, isn't controlled by anyone. So I know I want to link this character and this token. So I'm going to go represents character. I'm going to change this to Erased Nin. That'll autofill here. So now this character knows, this token knows that it is a version of this character sheet. They are now linked, which means I can do some fun stuff like this. So if I go click on the token here, let's say I want this red bubble to display my hit points. So under red, bar 3, I'm going to click on none, and it's going to show all the fields on my character sheet. Right? This is every field on the sheet. So I'm going to go looking for hit points. Now, of course, I don't have any hit points right now because I haven't finished making my character. But let's imagine that I had hit point maximum. Let's say I have 100 hit points and I currently have 40 remaining. So you can see that as I update the character sheet, the token automatically adapts along with it, according to the token's parameters. Now, if I didn't want to see the bar on that, or I didn't want to show the bar, I could say, turn that off, right? So I can show it or disable it here. So you get 3 for each token, and each one can be attached to a different thing, right? So you can go, let's say, red is going to be hit points, and we're going to make blue armor class, and we're going to make green speed. Okay, and then as you put those in, they update automatically on the token. Now, the last thing you need to do while you're playing around with this is go to the character, right? Go to the sheet, go edit on the character. Now, you'll notice I don't have use selected token, which means that if I am dragging this from here onto the sheet, it will not know what character this is connected to until I click use selected token. Now, this token is my default. So if, for example, I need to start up a new scene, right? Let's say we're getting in a fight on a ship, and I need to drop in my characters. Now that the tokens are linked, I can click in my journal, and I can just drag my token in there, and I can do the same with Bryn. I can do the same with Sathra. And I can do that, right? Now, it's using basically the same features as if I was pulling monsters from the compendium, right? And dropping them onto the map. So from a bare bones perspective, that's really all there is to get a game started, especially if you're using any compendium stuff. If you're using compendium stuff from Dungeon World, you're going to get the character sheet, you're going to get the drag and drop, you're going to get all the rules, right? Those are all going to be available to you. All the compendium information, if you're using one, is going to be under the I here. So this is how we search for things, right? So if I need to find a monster, I know my monster manual is in the compendium. So let's grab a goblin. And then just like I showed you, once you find it in the list, you just click it, drop it, and there it is. And it's all pre-programmed with hit points, armor class, etc. If you want it to be bigger goblins, you can just drag them. You can copy and paste to add more giant goblins. You can copy a bunch if you need 4 goblins at once, until there's just so many damn goblins, nobody knows what to do with them. Now, I'm spoiled because I am addicted to the marketplace and the compendiums. Those two things have allowed me, especially for 5e D&D, to get in quickly and to create new scenarios, new maps very, very easily. Now, if you're interested in delving into some of the other like more advanced features, I'm going to show you really quickly how light works in this game, and not the light coming from a unicorn like you might expect. I'm going to show you a real quick tutorial on doing maps that use dynamic lighting. So let's walk through a couple of things real quick. I'm going to make a new map. I'm going to create a new page, and I'm going to use that one. So to use dynamic lighting, if you're interested in trying it out, to use dynamic lighting, here's what you need to do. So you create a new map, or take one you already have. Go into the, I'm going to title this, delete this. There we go. So go into the settings of this particular map, right? So this is what we looked at before. Turn on dynamic lighting. Decide whether you want to enforce line of sight, right? This means that the tokens can't like wiggle around the corner, and like update on drop, enforce line of sight, restrict movement so you can't actually go through the walls, and then global illumination flips it so it's light everywhere. That's how you can do outside, and you can still block line of sight. These are features you can turn on and off and play around with. So I'm going to turn on the first 3. You can tell when the screen gets a little darker that dynamic lighting is turned on. Let's grab a map. So let's go crypt. Let's just find a random crypt map. Again, it's going to take a second because, you know, I have everything, so it takes a minute. But what we're going to do is we're going to grab that map and we're going to drop it on the board, and I'm going to basically draw out some objects in it. So let's find something little. Here we go. So we'll start on this village to pillage one. So you see, I grabbed it and I dropped it on the token layer like a goon. Once it displays, I'll be able to send it to the map. But the other way to fix this, let me show you the other way. So this is the way you can drop it on the token layer and then shift it to the map layer. Or you can just click map in background and you can drop it there the right way. So play out my map, right? So I've got it on here. Scale looks good. This is a nice little cellar dungeon that they can go into. Cool. So we have our map layer set up. Now you can do this in either order. You can go in and populate the dungeon, right? This is where we can go. Okay, there's a goblin in this room, and there's a goblin in that room over here, and there's a hobgoblin right here. And you can just drag and drop them, right? Or, you know, build from your own tokens or however you want to populate the dungeon. So you do that, right? The reason I want to put these in here is because I want to show you something in a second. It's how I test it. So now that these are in here, let's imagine this is a crap dungeon. These are the only monsters in it. Now we're going to do dynamic lighting. So when you click on dynamic lighting, right, it shifts everything into a slightly more transparent mode. If you want more opacity, you can change that on that layer or the GM layer one here, right? If you want those layers to be more opaque or more transparent, you're the only one seeing them, so don't worry about it. You're going to go to the draw tool. And what I do is I do polygons, I do lines, right? So I click on that one, right? And then you're going to go in and you're going to outline your walls. Now, if you've watched me do GM prep for a dungeon, you've definitely seen me do this. I will. So remember, the players can't see anything on the dark side of the wall. So if I put the wall here, that means that the players can now not see this wall. So what I'll usually do is I'll try to trace the interior line if I want to show that there's a barrier, or somewhere in the middle. Another good trick for this when you start doing this is choose a tool that matches the size of the walls that you're working with. So these walls are quite thick, so I can use a standard size line, but if the walls are thinner, I can use a tiny thin line. I don't really usually like to, but it is a useful thing to know. So let's go ahead and we'll just do a couple of rooms. So I'm going to go, again, we'll go up here. We're going to make sure we're on the dynamic lighting layer. We're going to go polygon line. And we're going to just draw a line. So if I click here, and then I left click, then I left click again. I left click again. I left click again. And you just keep doing this as you draw around the outside wall of the dungeon. So depending on your dungeon's design, this will be a more or less arduous task. And you can, certainly be more exacting than I am currently being. But this is basically the gist of it. So you go ahead and you draw. I use pink for walls, I think just because I did by default one day. I use pink for walls and like other colors for different objects. But you'll find your own. And the last thing you want to do, I'm not holding down a key. I'm just left click, left click, left click. Every time I create a new point and pivot, click, point, pivot, right? And then when you get to the end, you click as close to the edge as you want and it'll close your polygon. And now we've created an outside perimeter for our dungeon. Now, if you want to check, this is how this works. If you want to check if your walls are done properly, go back to the token layer, click on a token, right? Left click twice, go to advanced, make sure that they emit light or have sight. So emits light is how far can they see? Is it 360 degrees or is it a tunnel? So let's say maybe they've only got a 90-degree field of view. If it is a torch or a lantern, then they shed light that everyone can see. Turn on has light. If you don't have, or has sight, if you don't have has sight, it will not generate their sight cone. But once this is set up, click Save Changes. And now we can see that our little goblin with his 180-degree cone of vision, we can see that. But if you really want to see this from a player perspective, left-click the token, Control L, and now we are seeing as the goblin sees. And once you click off, it allows you to return to your normal view. So let me go back to 360 and let's walk around our dungeon as this goblin. So here's our dungeon now, right? And you'll notice it doesn't update when I move because I set it to only update on place. But if you want to allow your players to update the map as they move their token around, so you can do like peering around corners, then you go in here and make sure that only update on drop is turned off. So there you go. So now Control L, let me go back here, Control L, and you can see now in real time, we got our wiggly walls, right? So that's dynamic lighting at a glance. What I'll often do is I will go in and I will create on the lighting layer, I'll create an additional area that allows me to create like doors or whatever. So if let's imagine there's a portcullis across here and I want to block it off, I'll go into dynamic lighting and I'll grab a polygon and I'll do it in another color. So let's do it in orange and let's draw a door. And so what I'll do is I'll click past the wall on both sides. And now we have this door blocking the way so that if the goblin were standing here, they wouldn't be able to see through that or go past it. It has now become a concrete wall for that token to bang into. And the reason why I draw the door like that is that now I can, when they open the door, I can grab it and move it away, which again returns them to the dynamic lighting mode. They can see through that wall. But if they ever close the door behind them, I don't have to redraw the door. I can just grab it from the void. And as you can see, here's the door halfway, and there's the door closed. So for me, if I'm running a game, that's everything to get me started. Now, obviously, there are a lot more features. We didn't end up having time for questions or answers as we go through this first one. I'm definitely going to need to put in another episode to go into the detailed stuff. But what I'm hoping is that this doesn't give you all the answers you need, but it gives you enough answers to know how to get started, how to import some maps, whether your own or from the marketplace, how to draw on those maps. If you're using dynamic lighting, it's how to try it out. My hope is that it's enough to give you confidence to just start a game and to try it, right? So maybe do that, right? Get out there, make a Roll20 account. Even if you're not going to play, create a new game, try out some of the features, and then come back next week. And what we'll do then is we'll dig more deeply into some of the features, and I'll get some questions from you for part 2 of our Roll20 implementation. Yeah. All right, cool. So we'll come back and we'll do episode 98. That'll be a second Roll21. And hopefully if you're at home and you're suffering and you're missing your tabletop game, hopefully today is enough to inspire you to take that game, import it into Roll20 or the VTT of your choice, and that this at least gives you something to refer to. Now, of course, if you're in the middle of like setting up a game and you can't figure out what to do and you really want to figure it out, you don't want to wait for next week for me to talk through it, you can always hit up me or Roll20 app on Twitter if you have questions. You can check out the forums. There's tons of good, useful stuff on the Roll20 forums that'll help you out. Definitely check all that stuff out. And if you run into any problems, hit me up on Twitter, hit up the wiki, hit up the forums. There are lots of people out there who know more even than I do about Roll20, and I'm sure we are all very excited to give you a hand. So hopefully that has helped. Thank you for coming to this part 1 of 2 of a very special episode of Office Hours. We will come back next week to talk a little bit more about getting the most out of the virtual tabletop. Thanks for coming, everybody. We'll see you next time.